They thought I was done. My son mixed pills into my tea so I wouldn't ask about the deed. Thought I'd be too sleepy to notice the missing mail, the quiet whispers, the sudden urgency to get my signature on things I hadn't even read. I tasted the bitterness in the cup. I knew it wasn't the honey. He brought it to me warm, hands too polite, voice too smooth. It'll help you rest, Mom. Rest from what? I wasn't tired. Just tired of pretending I didn't see what was happening. The house I paid off with my husband suddenly. Too much for me. The deed I hadn't laid eyes on in months. The papers they kept sliding across the table with a pen already clicked. Just sign, Mom. It's for your safety. I smiled. Drank slow. But I never swallowed all of it. Some nights I poured it in the plant by the door. The one she never watered. Watched it shrivel. Watched it mirror me. I played along. Shuffled a little slower. Pretended to forget things. Let them think the fog was setting in. But I kept a notebook under my mattress. Dates, names, times. The day they changed the locks. The day they took my wedding ring to have it cleaned and didn't bring it back. I heard them through the vents, her saying, "She won't know the difference." Him replying, "She's already slipping." I wasn't slipping. I was studying, waiting, saving the little energy I had left for the one move that would count. The legal kind. The permanent kind. My hand trembled when I wrote, yes, but not from weakness. From rage so still it looked like calm. What they didn't know was that while they thought I was sleeping, I was rewriting the deed, line by line. They tried to drug the truth out of me. They thought silence meant surrender. They were wrong. I wasn't fading. I was planning. I worked. I fixed. I fed them before I fed myself. That house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was my bones, laid brick by brick. We bought the land before there was even a road to it. Just dirt and thistle, and a view of the sun rising, where the hills dip low. My husband and I stood on that patch of earth with calloused hands and empty pockets. He said, "It'll take years." I said, "Then we better get started." I worked days at the bakery, nights at the diner, wore the same 2 uniforms until the seams begged for rest. Came home with feet too sore to stand, but still found the strength to stir soup, pack lunches, and sort laundry by flashlight. The kids never noticed the light stayed off some nights to keep the bills down. They never saw the late notices I kept in a shoebox under the sink. That was by design. My job wasn't to complain. My job was to provide. The house started small, just 2 rooms and dreams. I painted the walls myself, coat after coat, so you'd never guess how uneven the wood was beneath. I laid the kitchen tile on my knees with a trowel and hope. When we couldn't afford a plumber, I learned how to fix the pipes. When we needed insulation, I traded my sewing skills for help. My hands didn't get manicures. They got blisters, and I wore them like medals. Every corner of that home had my touch. The front porch, where I rocked babies to sleep through summer nights. The stove, where I cooked every Christmas meal. The doorway with pencil marks showing how tall the kids were growing. That house wasn't just shelter. It was a story. Ours. I worked double shifts for that mortgage. Paid it off one scraped dollar at a time. I remember the day I sent the final check. I walked to the mailbox in my best dress like I was sending off a prayer. Came home and danced barefoot in the kitchen. Didn't even care that the sink was leaking again. I was free. No bank, no interest, just mine. I stayed up late most nights, sewing patches into knees and elbows, hemming pants, fixing zippers. My fingers cramped so bad I could barely hold a fork by morning. But the kids never went to school with ripped clothes. I made sure of that. They looked clean, cared for, whole. I had dreams for that house. Not big dreams, just warm ones. I imagined holidays with laughter echoing down the hall, a fire crackling, grandbabies curled up under quilts I'd made, the smell of cinnamon and roast chicken. I used to set the table even when no one was coming, just to keep the habit of hope alive. We didn't have a lot, but we had enough. We had Sunday mornings with gospel on the radio and biscuits rising in the oven. We had snow days where we stayed in pajamas and watched the world turn white outside. We had spring cleaning with the windows open and old records playing. We had each other. Even after my husband passed, I kept it going. I kept it warm. I dusted the mantel, made tea in the quiet. His chair stayed by the window. I talked to him sometimes when the house got too still, told him what the kids were up to, told him I was okay, even when I wasn't. I never remarried, never wanted to. That house was my marriage, my work, my witness. I made it a home every single day I lived in it. And I thought foolishly that the kids saw that they felt it. I thought they'd treasure it like I did. But somewhere along the way, they stopped visiting, started calling less, started saying things like, "We should downsize you," and "It's not safe for you to be alone in such a big place." They called it big, but it was never big to me. It was just right. It fit my memories, my prayers. I didn't argue. Not at first. I trusted. I thought love would remember. I thought all those nights, stitching, working, cooking, would count for something. But love isn't always loud, and sometimes it's too quiet to protect you. I worked. I fixed. I fed them before I fed myself. And all I wanted, all I asked, was that they respect what I built, that they leave my name on what I paid for in skin and sacrifice, that they see me not as someone to move out of the way, but as the reason the way was even there. I didn't need thanks. I didn't need gifts. I just needed to stay home, in the house that I built, stone by stone, thread by thread, year after year. That was my dream. I didn't know it would turn into a battle, not for space, but for memory, for the right to say, I was here, I mattered. And I'll be damned if I let anyone write me out of my own story. I didn't want to believe it. At first, it was small, a shift in tone, a chill where there used to be warmth. My son didn't call me Mama anymore, just Ma, then just, hey. His voice used to soften when he spoke to me, even in the hard years. Now, it was clipped, like I was a task to get through, like he was already halfway out the conversation before he'd even dialed. They stopped hugging me when they came over. She'd always been stiff, but now even his embraces felt rushed. A light tap on the shoulder, then straight to their phones or some errand to run. Can't stay long, he'd say, while I stood there with a pie cooling and a kettle just beginning to whistle. I told myself it was just age, that they were busy, that I was overthinking it. But little things kept going missing, not just affection, but belongings. One day, the extra set of keys from the hook by the fridge was gone. I checked the drawers twice. I asked, casually. "Oh," she said, waving a hand. "We must have taken them when we were here last. Thought it'd be good to have in case of emergencies." I smiled, nodded. My teeth clenched so tight I tasted copper. Then came the talk of updating paperwork. She brought it up like someone suggesting a change in curtains. "We should look into getting all this in order," she said, glancing around my living room like it was already hers. "Just in case something happens, you know. You wouldn't want us scrambling." I asked her what she meant. She laughed. "Just simple stuff. Making sure your name's on the right things. Or maybe not on the things that'll confuse probate." I blinked. She sipped her drink and tapped her nails on the rim like she hadn't said anything at all. After that, the mail started getting light. A few statements stopped showing up. I thought maybe the post office was making mistakes. But when I checked with the bank, they said the mailing address had changed. I hadn't changed anything. When I brought it up to my son, he shrugged. "We just streamlined things. Figured it would be easier for you." "Easier how? By taking away my access?" I laughed it off. Pretended to be grateful. That was easier than starting a fight I wasn't ready to win. But I started writing things down. I started making calls. I started watching them with different eyes. They spoke in a language of patience now, the kind people use when they're already packing your life into boxes behind your back. "You shouldn't be worrying about bills anymore. We'll take care of all that for you. It's not good for you to stress." But I wasn't stressed. I was suspicious. One night, I heard her in the kitchen, whispering on the phone. I stayed in my room, door cracked just enough to hear. "No, she hasn't signed it yet. We'll try again this weekend. If not, we may have to look into capacity stuff." Capacity. That word stuck in my teeth like a stone. Like she was setting the stage for something bigger. Something final. I started hiding things. Small things. My checkbook. My ID. The deed, what was left of it. I stopped drinking the tea they made for me. Stopped letting them sit behind me. I didn't want to believe I needed to protect myself from my own blood, but even the sweetest knife still cuts. Then came the flyers, real estate ones, slipped inside magazines, folded on the kitchen counter. "Look at this place, Ma," he said once. "One floor, no stairs. Wouldn't that be easier on your knees?" I looked up from my knitting. "My knees are fine." He smiled like he didn't believe me, or like it didn't matter if they were. They started walking through my house like surveyors, commenting on space, on sunlight. "This room could be an office," she said one morning, standing in my sewing room. I didn't answer, just sat still, watching my tea go cold. If she looked hard enough, she would have seen the papers I'd tucked into the lining of my robe. I found them one day, standing in the backyard. He had his hands in his pockets. She held her phone like a compass. "It's a standard lot, I think," she said. "We might be able to extend out that way." Then I saw a man with a tape measure, walking the edge of the fence. He didn't look up, didn't wave, just scribbled something on a clipboard and nodded. I stood inside, hidden behind the curtains, my hands shaking, not from fear, but fury. They were measuring the yard, not for me, not with me, but around me, like I was already gone, like I was just a formality they were waiting out. I didn't want to believe it, not my son, not the baby I'd rocked through the night, patched through fevers, held through heartbreak. But he wasn't holding me now. He was holding the door open, not for me to walk through, but for someone else to walk in. I thought I was imagining things, but now they were drawing lines, and I knew I had to draw mine. My hands trembled as they boxed up the life I built. They said I needed rest, said I was overdoing it, that I should let them take care of things for a while. "You've done enough, Ma. Let us handle it." I wanted to believe them. I really did. My body was tired. That part was true. But it wasn't from age. It was from holding up a house with one good arm and a backbone no one thought to ask about. It started with the pills. Slipped into my tea, my juice, even my evening soup. "Just something to help you sleep," she said, setting down the cup like she was giving me a gift. I didn't argue. I drank slowly, carefully. Some nights I spat it into a tissue and flushed it. Other nights I swallowed just enough to make them think it was working. I needed to know what they'd do when they thought I wasn't watching. What they did was sign papers. Important ones. Slid across the table while I was too dazed to read. "Just your initials, Ma. Nothing big." My fingers felt like clay. My head floated. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew. I knew what they were doing. The lines of the deed. The language of consolidation. Estate protection. Living rights. Words dressed up in legal lace, meant to confuse someone too tired to read the fine print. Me. I remember waking up one afternoon, and the house sounded different. Too quiet. Like something had been taken out of it. I sat up in bed and noticed the walls were bare. No photos, no clock. The dresser drawers stood open, empty. I swung my legs over the side, shaky, and saw boxes stacked in the hallway, taped shut, labeled in black marker, "Bedroom old clothes," keepsakes, kitchen misc. They were packing me up like winter decorations, like I was already gone. I shuffled to the living room, holding on to the wall, and there they were, the two of them, smiling politely as if they were arranging flowers, not gutting my home. She was on the phone. He was flipping through a folder. Neither of them looked up. "Ma," he said when he finally noticed me, "you should be in bed." I asked what was going on. My voice didn't come out strong, but it came out. He looked annoyed. She put her phone down slowly. "We're just organizing. It's time to make things a little more manageable for you." I asked. "Manageable? For who?" She smiled. The kind of smile that comes with bad news in a gift box. "You'll thank us later." Later. Always later. I sat in my own chair and stared at the boxes. The one with my wedding album. The quilt I made, the year he was born. My church hat, folded and crushed at the edge of a crate. My hands trembled just looking at them. Not because I was scared, but because I finally saw the truth. They weren't helping. They were erasing. That night, I went to the cabinet where I kept my old files, insurance, taxes, land papers. The drawer was locked. The key was missing. I asked about it the next morning. "Oh," she said, brushing crumbs off the counter. "We moved all that into a more secure place. Everything's digital now. Easier. Easier for them." I made a call to the county office the next day, when they were both out. I asked politely, shakily, if there'd been any activity on the house. The woman on the phone hesitated. "Are you the primary on the deed, ma'am?" "I was," I said, and my voice cracked. There was a pause, then, "There's been a sale request filed. Pending paperwork. Sale. Of my home. Without a word. Without a warning. They didn't even have the decency to lie about it. They just moved forward like I was a forgotten suitcase in the attic. They hadn't succeeded, not yet, but the intention was clear. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was legal. It was planned. That night, I sat in my room, still mostly bare, wrapped in a thin blanket. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. Shallow at first. Then, deeper. My hands were still trembling, but my mind was still mine. I remembered the sound of the hammer when we built this place. I remembered the smell of my husband's cologne by the front door. I remembered mending the curtains in the living room and baking pies with the windows open in June. I remembered being proud. Not rich, not powerful, just proud. And now they were trying to box it all up like it meant nothing. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I took my tea plane and sat on the porch. She passed me without looking. He nodded and tapped at his phone. I stared out across the yard. The one I'd watered. The one he took his first steps on. The one I raked every fall, even when my back hurt. I sipped slow and looked at the for sale sign tucked behind the shed. They thought I didn't see it, but I did, and I would remember. Every inch. Every name on every paper. Every word they used while smiling. Every lie they told with love in their voices. My hands trembled as they boxed up the life I built, but my grip was returning, and so was my will. They thought they drugged my mind, but words slipped past any fog. I wasn't screaming. I was writing. While they circled me like vultures in perfume, I was making lists. While they whispered through locked doors and closed drawers, I was taking notes in the dark. A small, leather-bound notebook, no bigger than my palm, hidden beneath the lining of my old purse. The one they thought was just sentimental junk. Inside that notebook were dates, times, names, and words. My words. Clear as day, no matter how blurry they tried to make me feel. The pills made my arms feel like sandbags some mornings, but my thoughts stayed sharp. Sharp enough to cut through every lie they laid in front of me. "Just rest, Ma. Sign this, Ma. You're too tired to read all that." They thought fog would erase me. But I'd been walking through fog most of my life. Grief, exhaustion, silence, and I'd never once gotten lost. Each entry in that notebook was proof. The missing mail on a Monday. The call from the county office on Thursday. The for sale sign tucked behind the shed. Documented with date and time. The moment I found my wedding album boxed next to dog toys in the garage. The 3rd of June, 11:42 a.m. The day I pretended to nap and heard her on the phone with a realtor. "She won't notice. Just finish the paperwork." I wrote it all down, no fancy words. Just truth. Simple. Undeniable. Then, I made the call. Not to my son, not to her. To someone who actually remembered who I was, Mr. Rayburn. My husband's old lawyer. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd retired, but I still had his card tucked into my sewing box. He answered with a tired voice. But when I said my name, he cleared his throat like someone waking up from a long nap. "You need help, don't you?" he said. I told him everything. He came the next morning, wearing an old coat and holding a manila folder like it held gold. We met at the library. Private room, no chatter. I slid the notebook across the table. He read every page without a word. At the end, he looked at me with those same kind eyes he'd had when we signed our first will. "You're not confused," he said. "You're under attack. We got to work." The first step was freezing everything. Bank accounts, property deeds, legal rights they thought they'd already claimed. He filed papers so cleanly, so quietly, they didn't even know they'd been locked out until their password stopped working. They thought they had control. They had no idea I still held the master key. I didn't stop there. I called the bank. I updated my contact information, changed the mailing address back. Then I opened a brand new account in my name, only with funds moved quietly, legally, far from their reach. I rerouted my pension. I moved every coin, every crumb of value they thought they had hidden in plain sight. I moved it all. I hired a new attorney to assist a woman, sharp as a tack and twice as fast. She looked at the paperwork they'd tricked me into signing. Unenforceable, she said. Shaky. We can undo this. We drew up documents together. New deed protections. A living trust with terms only I could change. Healthcare proxies. Legal layers they wouldn't see coming until it was too late. They thought they'd worn me down, but they didn't know I've been enduring things my whole life. You don't break a woman by burdening her. You just remind her how strong she is. I updated my will. Carefully. Deliberately. I named people they didn't know. Organizations that would carry my name with dignity, not entitlement. I left notes not to them, but for the ones who would understand. Quiet women. Women like me, who never had the space to say no until they were too old to be asked. Every evening, I'd sip my tea plain, thank you, and add to the notebook. Sometimes just a line. She checked the lockbox. He asked if I was sleeping well. I pretended to forget his birthday. That one made me smile. I kept a straight face during their visits. Let them carry on like I was still dazed. I nodded when she explained how complicated things get as we age. I smiled when he said, "We'll take care of it, don't worry." I wasn't worried. I was documenting. By the time they suspected anything, I'd already built the firewall. Brick by brick, document by document, signature by signature. What they thought was theirs was never truly given. Just loaned, and now returned to its rightful owner, me. I wasn't loud. I wasn't vengeful. I didn't need to shout or throw things. I just wrote. And that notebook, a little worn, a little creased, became the sword they didn't see coming. They thought they drugged my mind. But words slipped past any fog. And I was writing my way free. I didn't need to shout. I needed ink. It all came down to one signature. Not the kind they tried to sneak under my nose. Not the shaky scrawl they thought they'd get from a fogged-up woman holding a cup of drugged tea. Number. This one was mine. Steady, sharp, and stamped by the law. Mr. Rayburn filed the emergency injunction before sunrise. The new attorney, Miss Lena Clark, tall, fierce, voice like polished glass, walked it straight to the courthouse. She said it was time to push the line back in my name. The documents we prepared were airtight. My evidence was precise. That little notebook? The judge read every page. His expression never changed, but I saw the way he turned each one slower than the last. Like the truth was something heavy he hadn't held in a while. They didn't show up. My son, his wife, not a word from them. Maybe they thought I wouldn't go through with it, that I was bluffing, that the old woman would just fade away and let it go. But I didn't let go. I held on to the land, the memory, the right. When the ruling came down, Miss Clark didn't even flinch, just slid the paper toward me and said, "It's yours again, fully, no dispute." The judge granted immediate reversal of all unauthorized changes. I stared at it for a moment. My name, alone, clean, no co-owner, no agent of record, no messy footnotes with their names hiding in legalese. My house, my name, my life. We went straight to the clerk's office. No time wasted. She handed me the new deed on thick paper, fresh with ink and full of power. I signed it at dawn, the first rays of light slipping through the window beside me. There was a quiet breeze. It felt like something was blessing the moment. I wore the cardigan. My husband loved the one with the frayed cuffs and the little button he replaced with a penny one year. I could almost hear him in that room, saying, "You done good, baby." I didn't cry. I smiled. Then I went home. The locks were changed before noon. My lawyer handled it. No drama, no warning. Just clean, cold keys and a locksmith who didn't ask questions. I watched as he removed the old brass, the ones they used, the ones they took without asking. and replaced them with a set that clicked like a door sealing shut on everything that came before. I walked through every room slowly. The house felt different, lighter, like it had been waiting for me to wake up, like it had missed me. I opened the windows, let the fresh air rush in and chase out whatever lingered behind her perfume. Their plans, that scent of betrayal that clung to the walls like smoke. I unpacked the boxes they left behind, one by one. Some things were gone, but not the ones that mattered. The photograph of my husband and me on our first anniversary, still in the frame, just upside down at the bottom of a drawer. My sewing scissors. A chipped mug with my favorite verse. Small, stubborn pieces of my life that refused to be thrown out. I washed the sheets, cleaned the fridge, put flowers in a vase, lavender and white daisies. I lit a candle, not for ceremony, for comfort. Then I sat down in my chair, the one by the window, and held the deed in my hands. I didn't need to call anyone, didn't need to tell the neighbors, didn't post a thing. I had nothing to prove. I'd already won. It wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine, what I built, what I earned, what I kept alive even when they tried to bury it under paperwork and pity. My lawyer would send the notice later that day. To their house. Registered mail. Immediate revocation of authority. Unauthorized actions reversed. All power restored to sole title holder. Just words. But legal ones. And they held more weight than anything either of them ever said. No confrontation. No courtroom shouting. Just the law doing what it should have done from the beginning, protect the one who paid the price. I took it all back. Quietly. The property. The paperwork. The right to say, this is mine. No one clapped. No one cheered. But the wind did pick up outside. A little louder. Like even the trees were standing for me. And I knew then fully, finally, that I wasn't weak. I wasn't broken. I was a woman who knew how to endure, who knew how to wait, who knew how to hold a pen like a sword. They thought I'd sleep through it all, but I was writing a new deed. I didn't yell. I sold it. They thought I'd be too sentimental to ever leave, that I'd cling to those four walls like they were my lifeline. But what they didn't understand is that the house wasn't my anchor. I was. I built that home. I could let it go, because I knew who it truly belonged to, and it wasn't them. So I listed it, quietly, cleanly, through a firm they'd never heard of, under a trust name they wouldn't trace. I didn't put a sign out right away. I wanted to wait. I wanted the moment to mean something. The realtor came when they were away on a weekend trip. She walked through, nodding, taking notes. Said it was well kept. Said the bones were strong. I smiled and told her I'd done all the fixing myself. They didn't lift a hand, I said. She looked at me for a long second, then said, "You're the seller, right?" I nodded. "All of it's in your name?" "It is now." The paperwork moved faster than I expected. Turns out, when a house is fully paid, clean of liens, and sitting on land with history, buyers don't hesitate. One offer came in above asking. A family, young couple, 2 kids, a dog. Wanted to plant a garden. They asked if I'd leave the swing in the backyard. I said yes. It felt right handing it to someone who actually wanted to make memories there, not erase mine. While the sale finalized, I packed the things that mattered. Not everything, just the things that told my story. My husband's shaving brush, the baking tin I used for every birthday cake, the notebook, the deed now framed, a small stack of photos, a church fan with my mother's name still printed on the back. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't need to. I'd already picked my new place. A small apartment just across town. Quiet neighborhood, 2nd floor, good light, no stairs, no ghosts. It had a little patio, enough room for 2 chairs and a plant stand. I bought a tiny blue kettle for the stovetop. No one else would touch it but me. The day I moved, I rode in the passenger seat of a small moving van, humming to myself. The driver asked if I was nervous. I said no. I said I was going home. It was the first time I'd slept a full night in months. No whispers behind closed doors. No footsteps outside my bedroom. No one checking if I'd taken my tea. Just silence. My kind of silence. I woke up before sunrise the next morning and made a cup of coffee. Not tea. Coffee. Strong. Black. No sugar. I sat on the patio, feeling the breeze on my face, and I smiled at the quiet. Not the lonely kind. The earned kind. They came back the next day. My son, his wife, pulled into the driveway like it was any other Sunday. She was on her phone. He was carrying a bag of groceries. Maybe they were planning to restock the fridge. Maybe they thought I'd cook them something, or clean something, or sit quietly in the corner like a guest in my own life. But the sign was waiting. Sold. Right there in the front yard. Red letters bold as truth. The door was locked. The keys didn't work. The security system had been changed. No code, no entry. The look on their faces, I didn't see it myself, but I've pictured it. That pause, that confusion, the slow realization that everything they assumed was theirs no longer was. That the woman they tried to erase had walked out not in defeat, but in control. He tried calling 4 times. Left a message that said, "I think there's a mistake." There wasn't. She sent an email that started with, "You can't just," but I could. And I did. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I owed them nothing. The check from the house sale cleared 2 days later. I set aside what I needed. Donated the rest to women's shelters, legal aid funds, single mothers trying to keep the lights on. I knew what it felt like to sit in the dark and pretend you weren't scared. If my story could stop someone else from reaching that place, good. I bought a new chair for the patio, something soft, something mine. I didn't look back. No yelling, no confrontation. Just a clean break wrapped in real estate and resolve. They'll keep wondering how it happened. Who helped me? When I planned it, why I never said a word. Let them wonder. They thought I was too old to fight, too kind to resist, too tired to leave. But I wasn't tired. I was done. I didn't yell. I sold it. They called. I didn't pick up. The first voicemail came the morning after they found the sign. "Mom," he said, his voice already sharp like I'd stolen something from him. "What is going on? Why would you sell the house without even telling us?" I poured a cup of tea. Jasmine. Steeped it slow. Let the steam rise up and warm my cheek. Then I deleted the message. They didn't stop there. 5 missed calls by noon. 4 more voicemails by dinner. Each one more frantic. More pointed. "You're being emotional. We could have helped you handle things better. This isn't like you." But it was exactly like me. Calm, focused, final. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the house. The thing they thought they were entitled to. The thing they'd already started designing their future around. As if I was just a ghost taking up space in their plans. She called me heartless in one of the messages. Said I'd blindsided the whole family. I smiled at that one. Funny how people who never listened suddenly remember your name when money's involved. There were no questions about how I was feeling. No asking if I was safe. If I had groceries. If I needed help setting up the new apartment. Just anger. Entitlement. Thinly veiled guilt dressed up as concern. I didn't answer. I didn't write back. I didn't give them the gift of my voice. I gave that away too many times. This silence was mine. The apartment was quiet. Not empty peaceful. There's a difference. My new neighbors were kind, but kept to themselves. A few hellos in the hallway. A young woman down the hall brought me banana bread and said she liked my plants. I gave her a cutting of the pothos by my window. "Thank you," she said. Like she really meant it. Like gratitude wasn't a formality. I filled my space with light. Curtains I chose. A blanket that didn't smell like memory. My teacups stacked neatly in a cabinet where no one reached over me to rearrange things. A shelf for my books. My stories, not the ones they tried to write for me. Each day, I woke when I pleased. Ate when I was hungry. Walked when I felt strong. Rested without guilt. The small routines became sacred. Boiling water. Washing dishes slowly. Opening windows in the morning. Soft socks on clean floors. Peace isn't loud. It's in the details. I started painting again. Not to prove anything. Just to feel color move beneath my hands. Just to feel mine again. The first painting was a small house with blue shutters. Not the one I sold, the one I dreamed about as a girl before I gave everything away. The second painting was just a sunrise, big and wide and quiet, like a breath held for too long finally being released. Sometimes, late at night, I'd scroll through my messages not to read them, just to see the count climb. 7 calls, then 12, then more. I'd sip my tea, set the cup down, and delete every one without blinking. I didn't feel guilty. I felt steady. They made their choices. When they hid documents, when they boxed up my things, when they told each other I was too confused to notice what they were doing. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to claim what they never earned. What they failed to understand was this. I had already survived the hardest parts of my life. This betrayal, this loss, it didn't break me. It woke me. I didn't miss the house. I missed the meaning it used to carry. The Sunday mornings, the sound of my husband humming while fixing a squeaky hinge, my children laughing barefoot across the kitchen floor. But those sounds were gone long before I sold the place. They took them away piece by piece. I just closed the door behind them. I bought myself new shoes, the kind with thick soles and memory foam. I walked to the bakery 3 blocks down and bought my own birthday cake. I sat on the park bench by the duck pond and watched little girls feed crumbs to birds with wide smiles. I made my peace a practice, daily, unapologetic. And when another voicemail came through, his voice softer now, slower, I didn't even listen, just read the transcript. We made mistakes. We didn't mean to hurt you. Can we talk? Number? You talked over me for years. Now it's my turn. And I say nothing. Because peace, when hard-earned, doesn't shout. It doesn't explain itself. It just sits down in the sunlight and breathes. I changed my number after a while. I left no forwarding address. I didn't want the past chasing me through the cracks. They can tell themselves whatever story helps them sleep. That I overreacted. That I was manipulated by someone else. That they meant well. But deep down, they know. I was the one who fed them, who clothed them, who gave them everything. And when they took too much, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just walked away. And I never looked back. They left me alone. But I discovered I liked the quiet. At first, the silence felt like a bruise. Tender in places I didn't even know could ache. I'd been surrounded by noise my whole life. Children needing, husbands asking, doors opening and closing, phones ringing with someone else's urgency. For decades, I'd lived in the rhythm of everyone else's needs. So when the silence finally came, it startled me. But then, slowly, I began to see it for what it really was. Freedom. I started buying myself flowers. Not for any special occasion, just because I wanted to. I never used to. Flowers were always something I gave, never something I received. Roses for birthdays, lilies for funerals, carnations at the church. But never for me, until now. The first bouquet was yellow tulips. I saw them at the market, upright and bright, like little suns in a bucket. I brought them home, trimmed the stems with care, and placed them in the mason jar I used to keep pennies in. They sat on the kitchen table like a small revolution. And every time I passed them, I smiled not because someone gave them to me, but because I gave them to myself. The mornings became my favorite time of day. The sunlight filtered through the curtains just so soft and golden, laying itself gently across the floor like a quiet promise. I'd make tea, wrap my shawl around my shoulders, and just sit. No rush, no schedule, no one asking for anything. The stillness wasn't empty. It was full. Full of the life I'd forgotten was mine. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. Didn't need to dress for anyone else's comfort. I wore sweaters with little holes and socks that didn't match. I wore my gray hair down and long. The way I used to before he said it made me look tired. I wasn't tired. I was simply done performing. I made my own routines, watering my plants every Tuesday, reading poetry before bed, trying new recipes, some of them disasters, most of them simple joys. I burnt a batch of muffins once and laughed so hard I had to sit down. Not because it was funny, but because I hadn't laughed that freely in years. Some days, I wrote, not for anyone else, just for myself. Little things, memories, ideas, questions I never got around to answering. Once, I wrote down, maybe I wasn't the burden after all. That line stayed with me, because that's what they made me feel. In the end, like I was too much. A problem to solve. A name to be removed. But I see it differently now. I wasn't a burden. I was the backbone. I was the one who stayed. The one who kept the lights on, the socks mended, the fridge full. The one who held the center when everything else spun out. And when they left me behind, I found something I hadn't had in a long, long time. Me. I remembered the little girl I used to be, curious. Barefoot. Hands in the dirt. I remembered how I used to draw flowers in the margins of my notebooks. How I always sang to myself when I worked. How I dreamed of traveling, even if it was just to the next town over. Somewhere along the way, I gave her up. I traded her softness for survival. But she was still there, quiet, waiting. And now, she sits beside me on the patio, watching the birds flit across the wire. We sit together, the girl I was, the woman I became, and we breathe the same air. No shame, no noise. I've learned how to be alone without being lonely. I've learned that solitude is not the absence of love. It is the space in which love can return to you. I don't miss the phone calls that came only when bills were due or favors were needed. I don't miss being looked at like a wallet or a relic. I miss the boy my son used to be. But I don't miss who he became around her. I've let go. Truly. And in letting go, I've grown. I've become someone I wish I'd known sooner. Someone who sets boundaries like tea kettles firm and hissing when pushed too far. Someone who dances barefoot in the kitchen with no music. Someone who chooses herself and never apologizes for it. They left me, but I found myself. And maybe that was the real gift. Maybe the silence they forced on me became the quiet I needed to hear my own thoughts again. To look in the mirror and not just see a mother, or a widow, or an old woman, but a person. Whole, wise, worthy. The flowers I bought last week were white lilies. I arranged them with care. I lit a candle beside them and sat down with a fresh cup of tea. The air was warm, the kind that wraps itself around your shoulders like a soft goodbye to winter. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Because I was full. Not of anger, not of sorrow, but of peace. They left me alone. But I discovered I liked the quiet. We weren't weak. We were gathering strength. It started with a letter. Not to him. Not to her. Not even to a lawyer. It was to the local newsletter, the little one that still came printed on real paper, folded neatly in mailboxes on Thursdays. I sent it in under a pen name, E.M. Just a woman who remembers things. It wasn't meant to be dramatic, just true. I told the story, plain and quiet. How I built a home and nearly lost it. How I trusted the wrong hands. How I survived it all. Not with shouting, but with planning. With silence, with ink. I didn't give names. I didn't need to. The story did the work. 2 weeks later, the replies came. First one, then 3, then 12. Letters slipped under my door. Emails forwarded through the editor. Notes on floral stationery. Torn notebook paper. Sticky notes. All of them from women. Older, wiser, some single, some widowed, some still married but already erased from their own households. One said, "You told my story better than I ever could." Another wrote, "They moved me into a back room and took my name off the mortgage." I thought I was the only one, but the one that stayed with me said, "I always thought I was just tired, but maybe I was just being pushed out of my own life." I sat with those words in my lap and cried. Not because I was sad, because I wasn't alone. So I started something. Nothing formal, just tea. A Thursday afternoon circle at the library. We met in the small community room, the one with uneven chairs and chipped paint. I brought cookies the first time. Only 2 women showed up. One wore gloves she never took off. The other didn't speak for half an hour. But they listened. And when I spoke, I saw something in their eyes: recognition. Not pity, not shock. Just, yes, me too. We kept meeting. The next week, 5 came, then 8. Soon, we had to ask the librarian for more chairs. Some came with folders of paperwork. Some just came to sit beside someone who wouldn't interrupt them. We didn't shout. We didn't rage. We spoke in full sentences, interrupted only by sips of tea and the sound of women reclaiming themselves. I taught them what I learned about deeds, about trusts, about the language used to shut women out of their own stories. I helped one woman reopen her bank account. I helped another contact her cousin, the only person who ever truly looked out for her. We laughed sometimes. Real laughter. The kind that leaves you breathless and a little lighter. They started helping each other too, driving to appointments, sitting through meetings. One of them, Maria, rewrote her will with a young lawyer she'd mentored through church. She brought cupcakes the day it was finalized. We celebrated like it was a wedding, but we were marrying ourselves to our worth. No one saw us coming. We weren't loud. We didn't make speeches or hang banners, but we showed up week after week and looked each other in the eye like witnesses, like warriors. I called it the table, because most of us had been pushed away from one. Now, we had our own. We weren't just grieving what we lost. We were building something new, out of scraps, out of stories, out of quiet strength. The best part was watching them remember who they were. The woman who used to be a school principal, now helping another write her testimony for a property case. The woman who'd sewn quilts for decades now, starting a small side business, funded with her own money, not her son's permission. The woman who never spoke in the first meeting, now leading the fifth one. I watched them bloom. And in their blooming, I felt something rise in me, too. Not pride, power. Not the kind that needs applause. The kind that moves in silence and grows in shadows. We weren't weak. We were gathering strength. And now that we had each other, we weren't going back. I started getting messages from women in other towns. A niece of one of our members started a similar circle in her community center. Another group began meeting online women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, sharing resources, contacts, words of comfort, and warnings. They used the phrase I wrote once, "Not dead, just done giving it all away." It became a movement, not the kind that makes headlines, the kind that changes lives one page at a time. We don't need parades. We need space. We need names. We need hands holding other hands and saying, "I believe you." I keep the original article framed now not because of what I wrote, but because of what it started. A single voice in the quiet, making room for others. I was once just a woman sipping tea in a too-quiet house, wondering if my life had been swallowed whole. Now I am a thread in a tapestry of voices that will not be silenced again. They never saw us coming, but we were always there, in every mother forgotten, in every woman's name signed away, in every deed rewritten too late, in every voice that chose truth over peace. We were not broken. We were gathering. And now, we rise. They thought they'd erase me. But the ink I laid down will last longer than their excuses. It's all written now. Signed. Sealed. Witnessed. My legacy not just in the money I saved, but in the clarity I carved out of betrayal. Not in bitterness, but in truth. My will is short. Simple. Deliberate. Each word chosen the way I used to pick thread. For mending carefully. Matching the cloth, but strong enough to hold when tugged. There are no long explanations, no apologies, no loopholes. To my son and his wife, I leave a letter. Just one page, folded neatly, tucked into an envelope that will be handed to them after I'm gone. It says, "You made me small in my own home. You stood by while she packed up my life and called it organization. You signed my name without my blessing. You smiled while I disappeared. But I remembered, and I rebuilt. With my name, my pen, my own hands. This is not punishment. It is peace mine, not yours. That's all. There's no inheritance for them. No property. No pension. No, just in case. I gave them all they needed once time. Shelter, second chances. They spent it like spare change. They won't spend what's left of me. Instead, the money will go where it matters. A scholarship fund for women over 50 returning to school. I call it the Second Start Fund, because some of us don't get a first one with our own names on it. an emergency legal aid program for elder women navigating property theft, guardianship abuse, and financial erasure. That one's named after my grandmother. She died in a house she didn't own, even though she'd paid for every brick. A housing grant for women escaping family neglect. Not violence, necessarily, but that slow, invisible push that tells you, you don't belong here anymore. And a quiet gift to the table, the women who met in a circle and turned their grief into fire. I ask that they use it to open a permanent space, a place where no woman ever has to ask for permission to feel seen. I left my little blue teapot to a girl named Hannah. She's not related to me. She just brought banana bread once and listened to me talk about paint colors. I told her the trick is to stir counterclockwise if you want the tea to stay hot longer. She wrote it down. That's all it takes. Really, someone who still thinks your words are worth keeping. My books are donated to the library. My paintings will stay with the women who came to the table. I marked each one with a note on the back, not my name, but a sentence about the moment I painted it. After I changed the locks. On the day I didn't cry. While sipping tea in full peace. The apartment? Sold quietly, just like the house. The earnings go straight into the fund. The legacy isn't a building. It's the ripple. I didn't leave behind a dynasty. I left behind a document legal, binding, written in clean ink that tells the truth of who I was and what I chose in the end. I wasn't the doting mother with an open checkbook. I wasn't the confused old woman they hoped would forget. I wasn't the burden in the corner. I was the author of the final chapter. And I wrote it exactly how I wanted. They may gather someday, looking for loopholes. They may argue, call lawyers, tell themselves stories about how it was all a misunderstanding. They may cry, or not. But when they read my name in the will and see it followed by silence, they'll understand. This is what it feels like to be written out. This is what it looks like when the woman you dismissed chooses the world instead of you. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. It took me too long to remember who I was before I gave everything away. But I know now. And I've left that knowing behind like breadcrumbs for the next woman to follow. The ones who are told they're too emotional, too fragile, too complicated, too much. We are not too much. We are the foundation. And we're finished asking to be valued. So when they open that envelope, my son and the woman who smiled as she boxed up my life, I hope they feel it. Not anger, not hate, absence. The kind that echoes. I imagine them sitting at the table, reading the letter. No money, no assets. Just the words I chose. And somewhere, not far away, a woman will be opening a door to her first safe home. A student will walk into her first classroom. Textbook paid for by a stranger. A lawyer will answer a call from an older woman in trouble and say, "Don't worry, we've got you." And my name will be on those files. Not as an afterthought, as a reason. They thought they'd erase me, but the ink I laid down will last longer than their excuses.